Welcome to a special episode of the Your Morning Coffee podcast, recorded live in New York at A2IM's Indie Week last week. In this episode, we speak with leaders in the indie music space. First up is Mark Jowett. Mark is a co-founder of Network Music Group, with Terry McBride, one of the most enduring independent labels in North America. Since launching the Vancouver-based company in 1984, he's helped build it into a global operation spanning artist management, publishing, and recorded music, with a roster that's included Sarah McLachlan, Dido, and Passenger. Few people in this industry have navigated the shift from physical to digital to streaming across 4 decades the way Mark has.
And if that's not enough, Jay, you also got to interview Zena White. Zena is the president of Partisan Records, the Brooklyn and London-based independent home to artists like Fontaines DC, Idols, Cigarettes After Sex, Geese, and Lana Del Rey. She's been a driving force behind the label's reputation for developing credible long-term artist careers without sacrificing commercial ambition. Under her leadership, Partisan has become one of the most respected independent labels in the business. So without further ado, let's roll it right now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. 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 Standing by. Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Good morning. My name is Jay Gilbert. Some of you might subscribe to my newsletter, Your Morning Coffee, or listen to the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mark Jowett from Network Music Group, who just won an award, as a matter of fact. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we were very happy to have won. Myself and my partner, Terry McBride, we founded Network in 1984, so 42 years ago, and we were honored to get the Lifetime Achievement Award by ATIM, which was a tremendous honor.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Super cool. So tell us, for those with no prior knowledge, tell us a little bit about Network and your rich history.
Network started out, Terry and I worked at an import record store in the 80s when it was all vinyl, and a time of great music of Skinny Puppy and Susie and the Banshees and Echo and the Bunnymen and all those awesome bands. And I was in a band. Terry was our manager. We couldn't find another label to put our music out because at the time it was all kind of prog rock or glam rock. And so we started Network with a $5,000 bank loan. We put out Most record, but at the same time, we put out a record by Skinny Puppy, which is this kind of new goth electro band, and the Grapes of Wrath. And we kind of studied our craft by looking at the record labels like Mute Records and Factory and 480 and all these awesome labels that had a kind of thematic covers, and we tried to go about it a certain way, and it went pretty well. It was, so kind of off to the races.
Talk about that evolution in that time period. You went from sort of vinyl, CD, cassette, download, streaming.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, at the time, we're just lugging crates and crates of vinyl up and down the stairs from our office to these trucks. And then I remember we did a distribution deal with EMI at the time to take a big risk us. And I remember that Dean Cameron, the president at the time, very famous music icon, he took us back to the cassette factory and he proudly showed us his cassette factory with all the ribbon running through the cassette machines. It was pretty amazing. Cassette CDs, and then I guess it was downloads, and then it was basically pirating. And at that time, which was, when would that have been, in the 90s, early 90s? The industry almost kind of turned on its head and collapsed. And then streaming started to come along, and people didn't really understand streaming originally. But Terry, my partner, who was always someone who's obsessed by what the future is going to look like, kind of got the connection that would lead to a way people could consume music very easily, and it would potentially be a solution to piracy, essentially. So we really embraced streaming at a very, very early stage. And I think importantly as well, Canada is a big country, but a very small population. So we always felt it was important to make sure we had an American presence, a UK presence, and German presence. So we've had offices in many different countries now for decades. Small offices sometimes, but it's been, I think, very helpful for our artists in making sure that when we release music, it's able to be heard and promoted everywhere.
Yeah,
more or less.
Go to where the party is.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about physical, especially things like D2C, and how important is vinyl, CD, D2C business for you?
You know, it's interesting. For some labels, physical is very important. I mean, I think ATO Records, for example, there is like 70-80% of their business, which is incredible. And it is absolutely a fantastic and important format for connecting with fans. For us, digital is 70% of our income, 75% of our income. Then the synchronization income from film licensing. Physical is really important as a fan connection, but on a monetary level, it's hard to make work, we find. Basically, because of the cost of manufacturing, also you're dealing with shipping, and also it can affect your relationship with artists because, for example, if you're trying for a chart position in the UK, we had this happen with an artist called Matt Maltese, and you're using physical to get that chart position. Yeah. If that physical arrives late, then you screw your chart position, and then it potentially means that the artist is upset with you. Yeah. And in the digital world, you don't have any of those problems. There's no returns, there's no incorrect vinyl, cover title on the vinyl, or whatever it may be. So physical is great, vinyl is great, but it comes with a whole bunch of issues as well.
Yeah, much harder. Talk about what it means to be indie today. An artist comes to you. Why are they going to go and work with you and your team versus maybe pursuing a major?
It's a really complicated question at the moment, because if you look around you, you've got Concord and BMG merging. They're like a mini major. Are they still an indie? We've done a partnership with Create Music, for example, and there's a lot of consolidation. And also, sometimes if you're an indie, you may still have a lot of private equity investing in you. Are you still indie? Yes. I guess you're indie in the context that you're not driven by shareholders, and you're not driven by having to have quarterly reports where there's this great increase in volume, increase in revenue. You're more focused on a true relationship with the artist, and you set your own priorities, and rather than having to, as a public company, report publicly, things like that. But it's kind of gray at the moment. Yeah. The cost of running a label and competing at this point is high. And so you tend to need to have partners or private equity or things like that can enable you to have the kind of cash flow or the ability to scale up, to compete effectively.
Yeah. Network has been around for decades, and you've got employees that have been at the company for decades.
Yeah.
Talk about the culture there. Why do people stay there so long?
Yeah, I think we try to ensure that the artist is first, and we try to make sure that we treat all the artists equally, which doesn't always happen. If you have priority artists, sometimes you naturally would think that you would focus a lot of time and attention on them, and some of the artists that are just starting off smaller, that don't have a lot of revenue yet, wouldn't get as much attention. But we really try to ensure that each artist gets a chance and is treated well, and that's been a kind of ethos that we've kind of tried to make sure that it's shared by everybody that works at Network. And that also, it's a very horizontal company, so you don't have this big chain of command where you're always waiting for a yes or no from someone really, really high up. people can kind of make decisions on their own and in teams. And so there's a really good sense of teammanship, coherency, an aligned purpose in association and with artists. And I think that's helped to provide a really good ethos and why people are staying there. We try to treat people really, really well.
All right, I'm going to apply for a job. So tell me about, like, the music industry has changed while we've been having this conversation. It's evolving very fast. We've been talking about AI. We've been talking about, the copyright royalty board and everything is evolving really quickly. How do you and your staff stay on top of all this and educate yourselves as well as your artists, managers? It's moving fast.
We actually have an analytics team of 10 people, and we have a data scientist and someone who builds programs. I would never have thought, running an indie label, that you'd have a data team or like analyst team, but they help to kind of really provide us with deep insights on many, many things, but includes like how we can effectively use AI in a positive manner when we need to be really wary of it, and how we should basically move forward in that way as well. And it's a tough time for labels in that respect. Or that's the wrong way to put it. It's an opportunistic time. We need to be very careful. I mean, for example, we're approached almost daily with companies wanting to mine our data, saying, we're going to give you $200,000 dollars for all your data, so you can scrape all of your artist data, which is kind of crazy to think about. And we are of the opinion that we need to get our artists' consent for them to allow companies to scrape their data and their music. And there's presentations by many Udio, Sumo, things like that. We need to be. It can be worked with as a really positive tool, but you also need to have control over it.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit about streaming. No, there's not a ton of revenue in streaming for a lot of artists. I think the rights holder gets something like $3,000 to $5,000 for every million streams. But I feel like there's some opportunity there for markets to hear your music that maybe wouldn't have heard it, and maybe vice versa. What do you say?
Music, I think streaming is very, very hard if you're just starting out as an artist. It can take a long time. You have to have a lot of patience and very strategical about your growth, which can often come through socials, through touring, through collaborations. But streaming can also still be a very, very healthy revenue stream for many artists and for many labels. And the reason you're seeing this consolidation, the private equity coming to this space, is because people see streaming as a very reliable revenue stream. Once an artist gets to, say, 2 or 3 million streams a month, which is about $100,000 a year, then that's going to remain relatively constant. And so like a bank or an equity company goes, that's a really good royalty stream, just like an oil well, for example. And so actually, in the age of CDs or vinyl, you get the great first week, and then it may go down, it may not. And it was far less reliable. So streaming is actually kind of made the music industry like a very viable financial model, which is why so much money is pouring into it at the moment. The only challenge is that it's almost a bit more of a challenge to get from 0 to 3 million streams than it is to get from 3 million streams to 10 or 15 million streams. Mm-hmm. Because you need to figure out, the thing is, if there's 70,000, 80,000 tracks a day being released or whatever it is, how do you differentiate? How do you get visibility? How do people find out about you, discover you? So as a label, we have to look and find tools to help the discovery process, and that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, you and I were talking earlier about AI. It seems to be the hot topic, and everybody's talking about it. But it's not black and white. It's not that simple, right? It's not just people creating songs with a text prompt. It's every shade of gray in between. Yes. Somebody's using it to mix or master, or they're using it to fix a line or to translate into a different language. It's a lot. Talk about your views on AI.
Yeah, I mean, we signed an artist called Callie Bash, who is a really incredible AI artist. She's an artist. She came from a visual background. She used to be someone who was very high up in Pixar, example. So her background was creating very stunning visuals. And she would create music to kind of accompany those visuals, using Suno to create the beats, she would write all the lyrics and the melody. And we've released it as a bit of an experiment. And, you know, so we're, you know, and it's been, I mean, I think she's a very legitimate artist because her visuals are stunning, incredible. You should check her out. Her name is Kelly Bash. But the music is partly AI. And she's doing 3 songs a week, which is incredible. You know, so it's a bit of an experiment for us. So generally, I think if an artist is just purely an AI artist, and there's many of them out there, and some of those are streaming very, very well, we have mixed feelings about working with artists like that. And what we see for those artists is sometimes they have a big embrace in their kind of early time of streaming, but it eventually drops off because there's no real artist behind it. And people eventually want an artist connection. And when they go and look for Serena Rose, for example, or many other AI artists, at some point they realize there's no artist there. So even though the music may be okay, there's nothing to kind of empathetically connect you emotively with the artist and draw you in as a meaningful experience. And so a lot of those AI artists have very quick tails and declines. Yeah. So we're very much trying to avoid that.
Yeah. Mark, it's such a pleasure talking to you. I hope you'll come on the show and do a longer chat with me. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, how are you?
Good morning, everyone.
You got here fast.
I got here fast. I'm going to credit Indie Week for being 3 times busier this year, 3 times more successful, for the fact that I thought we were doing this tomorrow.
I think it originally was going to be on Thursday, and then we switched it. It doesn't matter. You're here now. It's good to see you. You can now take a deep breath, relax. We'll have a nice conversation. So, Zena White, Partisan Records. Speaking of awards, we were just talking about, you just won an award. Partisan won an award recently, right? Label of the Year or something like that?
Oh, yeah. It's really, the thing that I love the most about the Live Bears is that it's peer voted, so we all get to celebrate each other in the community. And I'm very proud of our team for kicking ass and taking home the Live Bear for 15 employees or more.
Nice. So for those with no prior knowledge, talk a little bit about Partisan, what it means to you.
What it means to me? Wow, that is a big question. Partisan's a record label, and we seek out immediately identifiable voices. And the second part of that mission is that they are enhancing the human condition, not exploiting it. I think that might sound pretentious, but the reality is that we're just really believe that like music can make a difference in people's lives, that it can truly uplift, it can change their experience, and so we facilitate musicians who we feel make music that can do that. And I've been at the label for in the US for 9 years, and I was consulting from London for 2 years prior. But the label's it'll be 20 years next year. So yeah, that's a little bit about Partisan.
Yeah. So the word independent means different things to different people. Talk about what that means to you.
I think independent, to me personally, I think it's a spirit, but it's also like a practicality. When you're working with musicians and you're facilitating them making music, you need to be able to adapt. And each artist is unique, so you need to be able to support them all in different ways. And I think that the independent sector lends itself much better to being able to do that over a longer period of time because we control our own budgets, we make our own decisions. And so the nature of autonomy in decision-making in a business sense is a better pairing for an artist to build a longer-term career.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about Indie Week. I was talking to Lisa earlier about this, that it's not just panels. The panels are interesting and you learn things, but just the relationships and bumping into people in line for coffee and those types of things. What does Indie Week mean to you? What are some of your experiences?
Well, my first ever Indie Week, which was before I lived here, it was probably 2014 or 15. No, it must have been even earlier than that. I came over on a business trip to New York for the first time, and there were these round tables, and obviously at this point I was a very junior member of the industry. It was my first New York City business trip from London. Very exciting. Stayed on a friend's couch. And I was paired in this round table at Indie Week with Martin Mills. And it was the first time I had been close to somebody who was obviously clearly an icon in terms of how they'd been able to support artists. Sure. And so like that was so impactful for me, and just even being in the space and being able to ask him questions and listen to his experience in like close quarters, it just really cemented the value of the community, and also for me to, you know, also still participate at this point in time, and hopefully to be able to meet people in that context as well.
Yeah. When was that moment that you realized you wanted to work behind the artist? And what are some of those moments that got you going for this industry?
Well, it's not music related, but when I was 17, I was acting in a play on the West End in London. And I thought I wanted to go in, well, I didn't know what I wanted to do. You know, you're a teenager. But I joined the National Youth Theatre in the UK, and it was very exciting. And I went to but I kept showing up. Like, the call time was at like 5 p.m. And then you did your show, and then you had a late night, and there was like nothing to do in the day. So every day I would like show up to the theatre early and try to find out how many tickets did we sell, what were the reviews like last night, what are all the production staff thinking. Like I seemed to be more interested in what was happening off stage than, you know, preparing for my lines, and it was a very small part. So when I went to university, I thought that my track was going to be theatre production, but I had been obsessed with music as a child. I grew up in a small town in the northwest of England where we didn't have live music, and I had a short list of requirements for university, and one of them was that it had to be in a town that had live music in it so I could go and see shows. So I was in school for theatre and English for about 18 months before I realized, like, nah, that's not it. I want to go and work in the music business. And so I left and did that instead.
Nice. A lot of labels talk about long-term artist development, but it's not always happening in practice in this business. Talk about Partisan and your approach to artist development.
Well, should we talk about some examples?
Sure.
Yeah. I think, you know, there's so many examples. I think, again, going back to the nature of being independent, we're lucky that we're able to take this long-term approach, and that we have been lucky to have partners along the way who have been synergistic and share that idea. So I think that the tricky part about the music business that we all need to bear in mind is, of course, the finance sector's here, and that is a good thing for artists too, because if they maintain their independence, then there's many, many options for them if at some point they want to, you know, create like a generational wealth for their family, to like liquidate the value that has been built in their repertoire. But in new music, it can be tricky if you don't have the financial freedom to be able to make long-term decisions. I think that the real artist development stuff comes from just spotting the talent and then believing in that talent from day one and having open and honest conversations. I was really lucky enough to, at the Billboard event last night, one of our artists, Femi Colioso, came and gave a speech about his experience working with Partisan, and he shared that he doesn't always enjoy the conversations that we have, that it's not always easy, that we don't always agree, but it's always coming from a place of love. And I couldn't have felt better about him saying that, yes. Because I think sometimes artist development can be considered like, oh, we believe in this artist, so let's just let them make all the decisions. And of course, they need to be in control. The artist needs to be centered. The artist needs to hold the power. And our job is to get out of the way and let them have that relationship with fans to be able to express themselves, because that's what's really life-changing for people. But it's also really important for us to have direct conversations. And I think that is what Femi was speaking to. So Ezra Collective is an artist that we have worked with. They're a jazz artist from the UK. When we started working with them, they were doing quite well at that point in time, but nothing was, there was no momentum. So they would say, like, we played Glastonbury, it was an afternoon slot, it felt huge, but then nothing happened after. And so we were just like, well, we have to build a plan. What's your goal? And they were like, well, if Lady Gaga can play arenas, why can't we? Well, last year they headlined Wembley Arena, the first jazz band to ever do that. So that's an example of how we work with our artists to find that North Star and then work towards it over a longer period of time.
Yeah. So 20 years ago, it was a different world. You wrote, you record, you toured. It's pretty simple. Today, you've got social media and short-form video, and it feels like there's too much for some of these artists to handle, right? There's a lot for them, and there are mental health implications to trying to do everything. How do you approach all of those different things that artists have to do today?
We try and break it down a little bit at Partisan. We consider, okay, well, there's getting the record right, of course, right? That's sacrosanct. That's number one. If you don't have the music, there's nothing to present. But when it comes to presentation, we're often looking for what story does the artist want to tell. That's a part of the world-building process that they should be involved with. And then we're looking for how do they want to represent this music visually. And then we're also looking for communication on how are they comfortable talking to their fans? Which platforms feel right to them to use that? How do we utilize the platforms as tools to bring the fans back to their own platform that they're building? And so we work over a period of months. It used to be that obviously it was much quicker to make vinyl records. Mm-hmm. I think that since it's been slower to make vinyl records, people think, oh, it takes 6 months from delivery to release because that's how long it takes to make a piece of vinyl. For us, it's sure, the vinyl is getting made, but that's how long it takes to really be able to do the job correctly, to present the world in a way that isn't going to be a burden on the artist. So those conversations, they're not formulaic. We have those pillars because we need to find a way to make sure that we've had all of them, but they're different for every artist.
Yeah.
And I think that over time, I think there's a number of artists that we've worked with, Geese, Fontaine CC, Idols, now Blonde Shell, where we have gotten better and better at this every single time because the artist is learning the process, we're learning the artist. We have a great staff who have been at the company for a long time, so they're growing too. Everyone's getting better with every album cycle, and everybody's learning the language of the music and of the art with every album cycle. And that language, I always think, if the record label's job is to fund, distribute, and market the records, then it's also our job to make sure that the artistic integrity that the artist has is intact the whole way through that process by the time it reaches the fan. So it's really delicate. It can be like holding water in your hand. And And also can be emotional at times because you do have to navigate discomfort. But that's how we do it.
There's not a lot of revenue in streaming for a lot of artists. How do you look at the economics of things like direct-to-consumer or merch and premium vinyl and all of these things? How do you look at the economics of the business today?
Well, I was with Ian Harrison yesterday talking to another journalist, and my takeaway from that conversation actually was that to be quite optimistic about the time that we're in for our revenue stream, because I've been talking to some other indies, and this is just anecdotal. We're seeing a decline in algorithmic streams at the moment. There's definitely a shift in audience behavior. People are leaning much more towards editorial curation, towards human curation. People are buying albums again. I don't know about anyone else's nieces and nephews, but mine are using MP3 players. They're asking for download cards. I'm not necessarily seeing like a meaningful uplift in downloads, but our businesses in this space, especially the ones who have been going for nearly 20 years, we've always been selling physical. We've always been, well, hopefully we've been over-indexing on sync. We've always had this portfolio of revenue streams. And so I'm hopeful that we're the resilient ones at this point in time. And, to go back to your question specifically for artists, I think the challenge when new technology comes in, and obviously we're at that frontier again, is music tends to be first to market of all of the entertainment products. I often wonder what we would be talking about if we were sitting here and Spotify had been adopted with an Audible model where we pay $9.99 a month and we get access to some music, but in terms of albums, you get 1, 2, 3 credits a month for that. Could that have maintain the listener behavior of the album, of keeping that intact? But regardless, I think we're in a moment where people are loving the album again. So I think that that's really optimistic, and hopefully we can find a way together as an industry. The challenge is simultaneously making sure that whatever's going on with AI isn't so disruptive.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the culture at Partisan, the people that you work with and you surround yourself with.
Tim, our president of the label, always says it's not what you do, it's who you do it with. Mm-hmm. So there were 12 people at Partisan when I joined full-time and moved to New York, and now there's 55, including our publishing team of about 10. So that growth happened in spikes in the last decade. However, they're just a wonderful team of people who really deeply care. And I think that our culture is such, because we've actually kind of grown up together. I mean, I've been there since I was roughly 30 and was one of the older ones at the time. Then now we have people, there's we try to, we talk a lot about living a good quality of life. I don't have children, but we have a bunch of children now. And I think that people work so hard in this business, and it's really important that we have a culture where they can have children as well. I think that makes it happier. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
you must be happy. You've been there a while.
It's really rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask a little bit about, there are all these music business programs at the college level now that maybe weren't there 10, 20 years ago. And these students are learning the business. They're learning about publishing and masters and neighboring rights, and they're coming out of school and they've got a really great foundation. What would you say to a college student who wants to go to work for Partisan?
It's so interesting that you bring this up. Like, for somebody who wants to come to work for Partisan, we do have an internship program that we run in the summers. Currently, we're only running it for one student per summer, and we actually did just hire somebody from the band year program. Now, that person she wasn't particularly doing this to work at Partisan, but the reason how we found her was because she did a project on one of our artists on Blunt Shell, and I guess one of her professors said, well, you should send this to try and send it to the team.
Yeah.
And so she did. She sent it to the managers, and the managers sent it to us and said, oh, you should talk to her. And so we had her come in for do an internship, and she was brilliant, and we sat down with her. And I think going back to the culture and the longevity of the staff and bringing them up alongside us, we really were just like, well, what do you want to do? And she was like, I actually really want to do sync. And our sync team were begging for a coordinator. And I'll be honest, like, there just wasn't really the overhead. But she started in doing a marketing internship with her, and she was so good and culturally such a good fit that it was like, we have to make this work. Because if you can hire somebody who's culturally a right fit, who's a hard worker, and you can give them what they want, or what they're seeking in their career, then in the long term, that will become an incredibly valuable employee. So Olivia's only 6 months in, but I really, truly believe in her, and she started the Banya program. And I think it's a really good topic that you're bringing up. There's a fellow that I used to work with in the UK called Darren Hemmings. He has a digital marketing agency called Motive Unknown, and he writes a newsletter called Network News. And he wrote a piece this past week on the on how hard it is to get young people into the music business in the UK. Mm-hmm. And it really struck me. Having been transatlantic for my career, roughly a decade either side at this point, there are differences. There's some things, like, in some ways, it's easier to break an artist in the UK, much harder in the US. One of the things that I think the US is actually doing better are these college education programs for the music business. I think that there seems to be the legacy of, like, the college rep programs from the majors that's still working. There's a couple of people that I work with who are on the younger side who came up in that. And I can at least 5 schools that I can name in the US that have these really fantastic internship programs. Mm-hmm. In the UK, I think we need to do much better in that. It was a slight deviation from your question there, Joe, but...
No, that's good. The hot topic today is AI. Everybody's talking about AI in music, but it's not that simple. It's not just creating a song with a text prompt. It's a tool that artists are using, in their creative process, whether it's with instrumentation, production, mixing, mastering. Where do you sit when it comes to AI tools with your artists?
I don't think it's not controversial to use generative AI as a tool. I think we all probably should embrace it in ways that it can help us on a day-to-day basis, and I think that goes for musicians as well. Honestly, I've been thinking and talking a lot about this. I know we did 2 weeks ago when we prepped, but I don't think it's our business, because our business is immediately identifiable voices. It's a very human business. It's I came in listening to Mark talk about the empathic relationship between fans and artists, and that's a very human to human relationship, and our job is to facilitate that. And so I think my position is that I have to be educating myself, understanding what's happening with the licensing, understanding where the opportunities are in terms of training revenue, in terms of platform opportunities. But ultimately, I think that the business of human-to-human music, human music to fans, is going to remain separate, and that we need to just ensure that whatever's happening in generative AI isn't disrupting that. And then I think that it could actually allow for even more gravitation towards that from fans as well. So I think it could also bring a lot of opportunity for what we do.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question that I stole from the Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway podcast. I just thought it was a great question to ask. What is one thing that you're super excited about today in the music business, especially in the indie world? And what's one thing that people should just calm the hell down about?
I'm really excited about, honestly, just how fans are engaging with music. Like, people care about albums again. People really want to immerse themselves in that. It's been such a joy and a pleasure to have worked with Geese and Cameron Winter for the last 6 years, and for them to have broken through on such a major level in a way that, you know, AI couldn't make that music. That was The Atlantic that said that, by the way. AI could not make that music. And I think that that's so true. So I think that in the last 10, 15 years, it's been a struggle for artists that are really speaking outside of, you know, what is working in the algorithm. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing that is exciting me the most. What do I think people need to calm the hell down about? It's probably obvious, but I think just like, I'm just sick of talking about AI.
Yeah. All right, I want to jump into this rapid fire closing here. Okay. So in the length of a tweet, I'm going to ask you.
Oh no, I'm so bad in 140 characters, as you can probably tell.
It's okay if you go over. What's the last record that you heard that makes you feel like the industry is going to be okay?
Geese getting killed.
And why?
Oh, I'm repeating myself. I'm going to actually say Yowie Nailgun, because they are so visceral, and they've come out of a scene in New York, and it really, you know, obviously we're business people, and so we have to choose carefully how we invest our resources, and I would have loved to have worked with that band. However, they just announced that they're signing to 4AD, so I'm like, okay, the industry's going to be okay.
The one piece of advice that you'd give to an artist about to sign their first deal?
Okay. The one piece of advice is, honestly, this is your business, and it's really important that you take the opportunity to understand it. And it's important that you trust the people who are running it. So make sure you don't have to run it. There are experts to do that, but make sure that you trust those experts.
And finally, what does success look like for Partisan 5 years from now?
Well, I'm personally going to be focusing on publishing a little bit more. So I think that I would really like to see a business for Partisan as a group, our partner labels who are part of our group, Select Discs, Section 1. I would really love to see a great ecosystem of creativity across our publishing entities and our record entities, and just being involved in more great music.
All right. Thank you, Zena. I appreciate it. Give it up for Zena
Thanks,
White.
Joe.
That was fun.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.